The room was very quiet as Ambassador Xylith 9 looked at the dark screen in front of him. He had tried to call the humans 47 times in the past 3 months, but nobody answered. The same message played every time he tried to reach them. The message said that the human diplomats were not available, and that all questions should go to their computer systems instead behind him. The big meeting room was full of worried aliens from 200 different worlds. They were all upset and making different sounds with their voices. Some clicked, some hummed, and others made deep rumbling noises. In the center of the room sat High Counselor Vextai, who had 4 arms and was waving them around as she talked to everyone. The computers in the room changed all the different alien languages, so everyone could understand each other. Vextai was saying that this problem with the humans could not go on any longer. She told everyone that the humans had stopped talking to them completely. They did not answer any calls. They did not come to meetings, and they had even taken all their ambassadors back home to Earth. Another alien named Counselor Thrak raised one of his crystal-like arms to speak. His body looked like it was made of clear rock that caught the light. He asked if maybe the humans just needed more time to think about the Council's last decision about sharing resources between different worlds. Vextai's extra arms moved faster when she heard this question. She said that time was not the problem because 8 whole months had passed since they last talked to any human official. The silence had started right after the Council said no to the human request. The humans had wanted to have more control over the star systems they lived in that were far away from the main Council area. Everyone in the room remembered that meeting very well. It had not seemed like a big deal at the time. The humans had asked for something that seemed reasonable to them, but the Council had rules about this kind of thing. No alien race was allowed to expand their control beyond the space that had been given to them when they first joined the galactic community. This was how things had always been done for thousands of years. When the Council announced their decision to say no to the human request, Ambassador Ben Clark had just nodded his head. He collected his papers and walked out of the meeting room without saying anything else. That was the last time anyone from the Council had seen a human representative in person. Vextai asked what their spy networks were finding out about what the humans were doing. She already knew the answer would not be good news. A translucent alien named Senior Intelligence Coordinator Kilnath stepped forward. His body was see-through and it shimmered when he was nervous, which he clearly was right now. Kilnath told the High Counselor that the news was very concerning. He said that their watching stations could not see into human space anymore because something was blocking their signals. They could not figure out what was causing this interference. The little bit of information they could get suggested that the humans were building something very big in all of their territories, but nobody knew what they were making or why. This news made everyone in the room very uncomfortable. The humans had always been open about what they were doing. They liked to share their new inventions and talk about their culture with other alien races. They had been this way for the 300 years since they first met other intelligent life forms in space. This sudden secrecy was completely different from how humans normally acted. Ambassador Xylith 9 turned away from the dark communication screen and looked at the worried faces around him. His own species looked somewhat like humans, but with green skin and larger eyes. He had worked with human diplomats for over 50 years and thought he understood them pretty well. But this behavior made no sense to him at all. He remembered the last conversation he had with Ambassador Clark just days before the big meeting. Clark had seemed calm and confident when he talked about the human request for more independence. He had explained that his people felt ready to take care of themselves in the outer regions of space, without needing as much oversight from the Galactic Council at the time. Xylith 9 had thought this was just normal political negotiation. Every species eventually asked for more freedom as they grew stronger and more advanced. Usually these requests were denied at first and then granted partially after years of discussion and compromise. It was a slow process, but it worked and kept peace between different worlds. But the humans had not followed this normal pattern. Instead of arguing or making new proposals or trying to negotiate, they had simply disappeared from all galactic politics. It was like they had decided that if they could not get what they wanted through discussion, they would just leave the whole system behind. High Counselor Vextai called for order as the noise in the room got louder. Many representatives were talking at the same time in their own languages, and the translation computers were having trouble keeping up. Some aliens were clearly scared while others seemed angry. A few looked confused as if they could not believe this was really happening. One representative from a race that looked like walking trees asked what would happen if the humans never came back to the council. Another representative from a water-breathing species wondered if this meant the humans were planning to attack other worlds. A third representative, who looked somewhat like a giant insect, suggested that maybe the humans had found some new alien friends and did not need the Galactic Council anymore. Kilnath raised one of his shimmering hands to get attention. He said that their best guess was that the humans were not planning any attacks and had not found new alien allies. Instead, it looked like they were working on some kind of massive construction projects throughout all of their territory. The spy satellites could detect huge amounts of energy being used and materials being moved around, but the interference made it impossible to see details. He also reported that several alien trading ships had tried to visit human colonies to do business as usual, but they found that all the normal trading posts were closed. The humans were polite but firm when they told the traders that they were not buying or selling anything right now. They said they were going through some internal changes and would contact everyone when they were ready. This information made Vextai even more worried. Trade was the foundation of galactic civilization. Every species depended on others for certain materials, technologies, or services that they could not produce themselves. If the humans had really stopped all trading, they would either have to give up many advanced technologies, or they would have to find ways to make everything they needed by themselves. The idea that any species could become completely self-sufficient was almost impossible to believe. The galactic economy had been built over thousands of years, based on the idea that cooperation and trade between different worlds was necessary for advanced civilization. No single species had ever tried to do everything alone because it would require incredible resources and knowledges. The meeting continued with more questions and worried discussions. Ambassador Xylith 9 kept thinking about his last conversation with Ben Clark. The human ambassador had seemed so confident and calm, as if he knew something that nobody else knew. Now Xylith 9 wondered if the humans had been planning this withdrawal for much longer than anyone realized. The meeting ended with more questions than answers, and everyone left feeling confused and worried about what the humans were really doing in their distant star systems. 3 days after the big meeting, the Galactic Council decided they needed to find out what the humans were really doing. They put together a special team of 7 different alien species to go and investigate human space. The team was led by Commander Zeltar, who was a military officer from the Hegemony Defense Forces, and Dr. Nindai, who knew more about human behavior and thinking than almost anyone else in the galaxy. Their spaceship was called the Harmony's Voice, and it was designed for diplomatic missions rather than fighting. The ship had all the proper equipment to send peaceful messages and follow the correct protocols when visiting other species. As they flew toward the edge of human territory, everyone on board expected to meet human patrol ships that would guide them to the right places for official talks. The first stop on their journey was supposed to be Alpha Centauri, which was the main checkpoint for anyone wanting to enter human space. For over 200 years, this star system had been busy with space stations, monitoring posts, and diplomatic facilities where aliens and humans could meet and do business. It was always full of activity, with ships coming and going all the time. But when the Harmony's Voice arrived at Alpha Centauri, they found nothing but empty space where all those stations should have been. Lieutenant Kavos, who was the ship's sensor officer, checked his instruments 3 times because he could not believe what he was seeing. According to the ship's records, there should have been 12 large permanent installations in this area. Space Commander Zeltar studied the information on his screens very carefully. His species looked somewhat like tall humans, but with blue skin and no hair. He had been a military officer for over 30 years and had seen many strange things. But this was something completely new. The orbital patterns around the stars showed clear evidence that large structures had been recently taken apart. But there was no floating debris anywhere. He told his crew that the humans had not just abandoned these installations, they had carefully removed every single component and taken everything with them. This was not the behavior of a species that was simply withdrawing from galactic politics. This looked like a planned relocation of massive amounts of equipment and materials. Dr. Nindai was very concerned by this discovery. Her species had evolved from insects that lived in large groups and worked together, so she understood cooperation and group behavior very well. She made clicking sounds with her mouth when she was thinking hard, and she was clicking a lot right now. She explained to the commander that this kind of systematic removal was not normal human behavior. Humans were naturally social and liked to work with others, sometimes even when it was not the best choice for them. This level of organized withdrawal suggested that either they felt seriously threatened by something or they were preparing for something very important. Commander Zeltar asked her what she meant by preparing for something important. Dr. Nindai clicked her mouth parts together several times before answering. She said that in her experience, when humans made big coordinated changes like this, it usually meant they had discovered something new or invented something that would change how they lived. The investigation team decided to continue deeper into human territory to see if they could find more clues about what was happening. As they traveled from one star system to another, they found the same pattern everywhere they looked. Human colonies that had once welcomed visitors from other worlds were now surrounded by strange defensive structures that nobody recognized. The trade routes that had been used for decades were completely empty. These space highways had carried cargo ships, passenger vessels, and diplomatic missions between human worlds and the rest of the galaxy. Now they were abandoned as if they had never been important at all. Most disturbing of all, their sensors began detecting massive energy signatures coming from the direction of Earth itself. These energy readings were unlike anything in the Galactic Council's databases. Whatever the humans were doing on their homeworld required enormous amounts of power, more than most entire star systems used for all their normal activities. Lieutenant Kavos reported that his instruments were having trouble measuring these energy levels because they were so high. His species had very sensitive perception abilities and could detect things that other aliens might miss. If he was having trouble reading the energy signatures, then whatever the humans were doing was truly massive in scale. When the investigation team tried to fly directly toward Earth to get a closer look, their progress was suddenly stopped by what appeared to be a solid wall of energy extending in all directions around the entire Sol star system. The barrier was invisible to the naked eye, but their sensors could detect its presence clearly. As soon as they reached this energy barrier, polite but firm automated messages began playing on their communication system. The messages told them to stay where they were and explain why they had come to human space. The voice speaking to them was clearly artificial, but it spoke perfect galactic standard language. Commander Zeltar activated his ship's communication system and spoke in his most official diplomatic voice. He identified himself and his ship and explained that they were representing the Galactic Council in an investigation mission. He said they wanted to talk to the appropriate human authorities about recent changes in the established protocols between their species. The response came immediately, spoken in perfect galactic standard but with an unmistakably human accent. The voice acknowledged Commander Zeltar by name and said that his presence had been noted and recorded. Then it informed him that the Terran federal government was currently engaged in internal restructuring and was not accepting diplomatic inquiries at this time. The voice also recommended that for their own safety, the investigation team should maintain their current distance from human territorial boundaries. This suggestion was delivered politely, but there was something in the tone that made it clear this was not really a suggestion at all. Nindai's antennae began twitching rapidly when she heard the phrase internal restructuring. She explained to Commander Zeltar that this term could mean anything, from a simple change in government leadership to a complete transformation of their entire society. Without more specific information, it was impossible to determine what the humans were really planning or what capabilities they might have developed. The investigation team spent several more days trying different approaches to gather information. They attempted to contact individual human colonies, tried to intercept communications between human ships, and even sent small probe devices toward the energy barrier to see if they could learn more about its construction. Every attempt was met with the same polite but firm response. The humans acknowledged their presence, thanked them for their interest, and firmly but kindly told them to maintain their distance. It was like talking to a very polite wall that would not budge no matter what arguments or requests were made. Finally, Commander Zeltar decided that they had learned as much as they could without risking a direct confrontation with the humans. He ordered his crew to begin the journey back to Council space so they could report their findings to the High Counselor. As the Harmony's voice turned away from human space, Dr. Nindai made one final observation that worried her greatly. She told the commander that in all her years of studying human behavior, she had never seen them act with such perfect coordination across their entire species. Whatever they were doing, every human colony and every human organization was participating in it completely. This level of species-wide cooperation suggested that the humans had made a fundamental decision about their future relationship with the rest of the galaxy, and they were all working together to implement that decision, regardless of what anyone else thought about it. The breakthrough that everyone had been waiting for came from a place nobody expected. Dr. Lisa Kane was a human scientist who studied alien life forms and had been working on a joint research project with the Galactic Council in the Triangulum sector. She was one of the few humans who had been outside human space when her government stopped all diplomatic contact. Dr. Kane managed to send an encrypted message through a series of communication relay stations that took 3 weeks to reach Council space. The message had to be passed from one station to another in secret, because the humans were monitoring all normal communication channels. When the message finally arrived, it was immediately brought to High Counselor Vextai Vexite, called an emergency session of the full council to read the message out loud to all the representatives. The meeting room was packed with worried aliens from hundreds of different worlds. Everyone was desperate to finally understand what the humans were really doing and why they had cut off all contact. The High Counselor began reading Dr. Kane's message in a clear voice that carried throughout the chamber. The message started by greeting the council members as esteemed colleagues and explaining that Dr. Kane was writing to clarify recent human actions because she believed the government's silence might be causing unnecessary concern among other species. The message continued by stating that what the council was witnessing was not hostility or aggression from humanity, but rather a declaration of independence. This single word caused confused murmurs to erupt throughout the chamber as representatives tried to understand what independence could mean in the context of galactic civilization. Vexti continued reading as Dr. Kane explained that for 3 centuries, humanity had operated within the council framework and accepted limitations on their expansion, their technological development, and their ability to make decisions about their own people. They had paid taxes to fund council operations, contributed resources to joint projects, and deferred to council authority in matters that affected their own citizens. The message then revealed the crucial turning point in human thinking, when their request for increased autonomy was denied despite 300 years of compliance with every council directive. The human leadership had reached a simple but profound conclusion. They no longer required council membership to achieve their goals as a species. Ambassador Xylith 9 leaned forward in his seat as he heard these words. This was not merely a temporary withdrawal from galactic politics or a negotiating tactic to get better terms. This was humanity formally ending their relationship with the Galactic Council entirely. It was like a divorce between species. Dr. Kane's message continued with an important clarification. She wanted the council to understand that this decision had not been made in anger or haste. Human economists, sociologists, and strategic planners had spent decades analyzing the relationship between the costs and benefits of council membership. Their conclusion was that humanity's natural growth and development had been artificially held back by systems that were designed for species with very different needs and capabilities. The council framework that worked well for many alien races was actually preventing humans from reaching their full potential. The message then addressed the construction projects that the Council's intelligence services had undoubtedly detected throughout human space. Dr. Kane explained that these projects represented humanity's transition to complete self-sufficiency. They were not preparing for war against other species, but rather preparing for complete freedom from external dependencies. Counselor Thrax's crystalline form flickered with agitation as he heard this explanation. His voice carried clearly through the translation system, as he protested that self-sufficiency was impossible. No species in recorded galactic history had ever achieved complete independence from the economic and political framework that connected all civilized worlds. He continued by pointing out that the level of infrastructure and technology required for true self-sufficiency would be beyond the capabilities of any single species. Every advanced civilization depended on trade and cooperation with others to obtain materials, knowledge, and capabilities that they could not develop alone. High Counselor Vextai finished Thrax's thought by saying grimly that such independence would indeed be impossible, unless the humans possessed capabilities that the Council had significantly underestimated. This possibility was becoming more likely with each piece of information they received about human activities. At that moment, Intelligence Coordinator Kilnath materialized beside the speaking podium with urgent news. His translucent form was shimmering more than usual, which indicated he was carrying information of great importance. He had just received confirmation of something that might explain the humans' confidence in their ability to achieve complete independence. The coordinator reported that their deep space monitoring stations had detected massive industrial activity in the Outer Rim territories. These were the same regions where humans had requested increased autonomy from the Council. The scale of construction and manufacturing in these areas was unlike anything that had ever been recorded in galactic history. When Vextai asked for more specific details about this industrial activity, Kilnath's form shimmered even more intensely. He reported that the humans appeared to be engaged in ship construction on a scale that defied belief. Their preliminary estimates suggested that humanity had built more spacecraft in the past 8 months than the entire Council fleet had accumulated over the past century. This news sent shockwaves through the assembled representatives. The Council's combined fleet represented the military and civilian vessels of over 200 different species, accumulated over decades of gradual expansion and technological development. The idea that humans could match this achievement in less than a year suggested technological capabilities far beyond what anyone had imagined. Dr. Nindai, who had returned from the investigation mission, stood up to address the Council. Her species' expertise in group behavior and social dynamics gave her insights that others might miss. She pointed out that this level of coordinated industrial activity required not just advanced technology, but also perfect cooperation across the entire human species. She explained that for humans to achieve such massive construction projects simultaneously across all their territories, every human colony, every human organization, and every human individual would need to be working toward the same goals. This suggested a level of species-wide unity and determination that was extremely rare in galactic history. Ambassador Xylith 9 raised his hand to speak and pointed out another disturbing implication of these revelations. If the humans had indeed developed the capability to build vast fleets and achieve technological self-sufficiency, then their polite withdrawal from Council space might not remain peaceful indefinitely. He reminded the Council that humans had always been expansionist by nature. Throughout their history, they had consistently sought to explore new territories and establish new colonies. If they were no longer bound by Council territorial agreements and possessed advanced fleet capabilities, there was nothing to prevent them from expanding into any systems they chose. The implications of this possibility created an uncomfortable silence in the chamber. The Council's authority over territorial boundaries and resource allocation was based on the assumption that no single species could challenge the combined power of all member civilizations. If humanity had transcended this limitation, the entire foundation of galactic governance would need to be reconsidered. As the emergency session concluded, every representative left with the understanding that the galaxy was facing a completely unprecedented situation that would require entirely new approaches to handle. The Galactic Council's response to humanity's declaration of independence was swift and predictable. Within 1 week of Dr. Kane's message, economic sanctions were imposed on all human territories. Every trade agreement between humans and other species was immediately suspended. Access to Council space was officially restricted for all human vessels and citizens. These measures were designed to force humanity back to the negotiating table within a few weeks at most. The Council's economic experts were completely confident that the sanctions would work quickly. They believed that isolated human systems would be unable to maintain their advanced technology without access to rare materials and specialized components that could only be obtained through galactic trade networks instead of the expected human delegation arriving to request renewed negotiations. Humanity's response was complete and total silence. No human representative contacted the Council to complain about the sanctions. No human trader asked for exceptions to continue their business relationships. No human colony sent messages requesting help or supplies. For 3 months, the economic warfare continued, exactly as the Council had planned. Their economists continued to confidently predict human capitulation, as the isolated human systems would surely begin to suffer from shortages of essential materials. The Council leadership waited patiently for human representatives to come forward and admit that independence was impossible. Then the first disturbing reports began arriving from across the galaxy. Mining operations in distant star systems reported the discovery of extensive excavation sites in asteroid fields that had been considered worthless and uncharted. These sites showed clear evidence of recent large-scale mining activity, but no records existed of any species being granted permits to work in those areas. Deep space. Sensors throughout the galaxy began detecting massive refinery ships processing raw materials at rates that suggested revolutionary technological breakthroughs in manufacturing efficiency. These ships appeared and disappeared quickly, making it difficult for Council monitoring stations to track their movements or determine their origins. Most disturbing of all, several species began reporting that their border systems were detecting unknown vessels of completely unfamiliar design. These ships were clearly advanced but did not match any known technology from any member species of the Galactic Council. The vessels appeared to be conducting survey operations in neutral space. The first detailed report of these mysterious ships came from Captain Roy Nelson of the exploration vessel New Horizon. His routine survey mission in the supposedly empty Kepler 442 system had encountered something that completely changed his understanding of what was happening in the galaxy. Captain Nelson's species looked somewhat like tall, thin humans, but with pale gray skin and large dark eyes. He had been exploring space for over 20 years and had seen many strange things, but nothing had prepared him for what he found in the Kepler system. His ship's sensors detected a massive fleet of vessels unlike anything in the Council's databases. When Nelson contacted the emergency Council session via quantum relay communication, his voice carried clear amazement and concern. He reported that there were 47 vessels in the system, each one approximately 8 kilometers in length. The ships appeared to be completely self-contained mobile cities rather than traditional spacecraft. His sensors had detected manufacturing facilities, agricultural systems, residential areas, and defensive capabilities within each vessel. The defensive systems exceeded anything in the Council's current tactical databases. These were not just ships but entire civilizations that could travel between stars while maintaining complete independence from any external support. Nelson continued his report by describing something even more surprising than the advanced technology. When the human fleet detected his approach, they did not respond with hostility or demands that he leave the area. Instead, they simply acknowledged his presence and treated him like a welcome visitor. A human officer named Captain Julie Martinez had contacted Nelson directly and offered him a complete tour of their facility. She was remarkably friendly and seemed genuinely puzzled by his concern about their presence in the system. She acted as if there was nothing unusual about humans operating massive fleets in neutral space. High Counselor Vextai interrupted Nelson's transmission to ask a crucial question. She wanted to know if the humans had explained their presence in what was supposed to be neutral territory not claimed by any species. This was important because it could indicate whether humans were respecting existing territorial agreements or ignoring them completely. Nelson's answer sent shockwaves through the Council chamber. He reported that Captain Martinez had explained they were conducting a routine expansion survey. When Nelson asked about Council territorial agreements, she had politely informed him that humanity no longer recognized Council authority over unoccupied star systems. The chamber fell into stunned silence as the representatives absorbed the implications of this statement. If humanity had developed the capability to rapidly establish self-sufficient colonies in any system they chose, then the entire foundation of galactic territorial law had become meaningless. The careful boundaries that had maintained peace for thousands of years could be ignored. By anyone with sufficient technology, Vextai carefully asked Nelson another important question about whether the humans had made any territorial claims or demonstrated any hostile intentions toward other species. The answer to this could determine whether the galaxy was facing a peaceful expansion or a potential military threat. Nelson's response was both reassuring and troubling at the same time. He reported that the humans had shown no hostile intentions whatsoever. In fact, Captain Martinez had offered to establish formal diplomatic contact if the Council was interested in discussing cooperative arrangements between species. Martinez had mentioned that humanity was very interested in peaceful coexistence with all sentient species throughout the galaxy. However, she had also made it clear that this cooperation would be between equals rather than within the framework of Council authority. Humans were offering friendship, but not submission to external governance. As Nelson's report continued, he described the advanced technology he had observed during his tour of the human facility. The humans had achieved breakthroughs in energy generation, materials science, and automated manufacturing that surpassed anything known to galactic science. They could apparently create everything they needed from raw materials without requiring trade or assistance from other species. Most remarkably, they had developed the ability to transform uninhabitable worlds into garden paradises within a matter of months, rather than centuries. Their terraforming technology could create breathable atmospheres, establish stable ecosystems, and build complete infrastructure faster than most species could construct a single city. When Nelson asked Captain Martinez how humanity had achieved such rapid technological advancement, her answer revealed the final piece of the puzzle. She explained that humans had been secretly developing these capabilities for decades while maintaining their public cooperation with Council restrictions. The humans had used their time within the Council framework to study every aspect of galactic civilization, learning from the knowledge and experience of hundreds of different species. They had then combined this knowledge with their own innovative approaches to create entirely new solutions to the challenges of space colonization and technological development. Captain Nelson concluded his report. The Council representatives sat in shocked silence, finally understanding that humanity had not simply left the galactic community, but had evolved beyond the need for it entirely. 6 months after humanity's diplomatic withdrawal, the Galactic Council faced a situation that had never existed before in the history of civilized space. Reports continued to arrive from across the galaxy, describing human colonies appearing in previously uninhabitable star systems. Massive construction projects were transforming barren worlds into garden paradises within weeks rather than centuries. Most remarkably, humanity maintained their consistent policy of offering peaceful cooperation with any species they encountered during their expansion. They never claimed territory that belonged to other civilizations, and always sought permission before entering systems that were already occupied. However, they also made it clear that they no longer recognized Council authority over empty space. Dr. Elena Rodriguez had been the former human ambassador to the Galactic Council before the diplomatic withdrawal. She now represented the newly established Terran Federation, which was the name humans had chosen for their independent government. After months of requests from increasingly desperate Council representatives, she finally agreed to meet with them on a neutral space station in the Vega system. The meeting took place in a large conference room designed to accommodate representatives from many different species. Dr. Rodriguez arrived with a small delegation of human advisors, while the Council sent their most senior diplomats and experts. The atmosphere was tense as both sides prepared for discussions that could determine the future of galactic civilization. Dr. Rodriguez was a middle-aged woman with graying hair and calm eyes that suggested both intelligence and determination. She had spent over 20 years working in galactic diplomacy and understood the concerns of other species very well. When she spoke, her message was simple but devastating in its implications for the existing order. She explained to the assembled delegates that the Galactic Council operated under the basic assumption that interstellar civilization required centralized coordination and resource allocation between different species. For 3 centuries, humanity had accepted this premise and worked within the Council framework, following all rules and contributing to joint projects. However, she continued, humanity's recent achievements had demonstrated conclusively that this fundamental assumption was incorrect. Advanced civilization did not require centralized control or resource sharing when a species possessed sufficient technology and knowledge to meet all their own needs independently. Councillor Vextai leaned forward in her seat as she listened to these words. Her forearms gestured as she responded that surely Dr. Rodriguez understood the Council framework existed to prevent conflicts over resources and territory. Without central coordination to manage these disputes, the galaxy would inevitably descend into chaos and warfare between competing species. Dr. Rodriguez smiled politely as she heard this familiar argument. She addressed the High Counselor with respect, while completely dismantling the logic behind Council authority. She pointed out that this assumption only held true if resources were genuinely scarce and if territorial expansion required displacing or competing with existing populations. She then revealed the technological breakthroughs that had changed everything for humanity. They could now create fully self-sufficient habitats in any environment, including the vacuum of space or the surface of hostile planets. They could transform uninhabitable worlds into thriving ecosystems within decades using automated systems that required no external support. Most importantly, they could establish productive colonies in empty star systems without requiring any resources from existing civilizations. The scarcity that had justified centralized control for thousands of years no longer existed, at least not for humanity. They had moved beyond the economic limitations that made the council system necessary. The council representatives exchanged worried glances as they absorbed these revelations. If humanity had indeed achieved what economists called post-scarcity technology, then the economic foundations that supported the council system would become completely irrelevant. The entire structure of galactic governance was based on managing limited resources between competing species. Dr. Rodriguez continued her explanation by addressing another crucial point about human intentions and values. She emphasized that humanity had no interest in controlling or governing other species. They simply wanted the freedom to develop according to their own values and capabilities, without external restrictions on their choices. The Council framework, however well-intentioned by its creators, had been designed to manage species that competed for limited resources and needed external authority to prevent conflicts. Humanity had moved beyond that paradigm entirely, and no longer fit within systems designed for resource-dependent civilizations. Ambassador Xylith 9, who had worked with human diplomats for decades, finally spoke up to ask the question that everyone was thinking. He wanted to know what humanity proposed for their future relationship with the Galactic Council and all the species that remained within the traditional framework. Dr. Rodriguez answered without any hesitation, and her response surprised everyone in the room. She said that humanity wanted friendship with all species in the galaxy. They valued the knowledge, culture, and perspective that each council species brought to galactic civilization, and would welcome continued scientific collaboration, cultural exchange, and mutual support in times of need. However, she made it clear that humans would no longer submit to external authority over their internal affairs or territorial expansion into unoccupied space. They were offering partnership between equals rather than membership in a hierarchical system that limited their development and decision-making. Dr. Rodriguez acknowledged that this represented a significant change to the galactic status quo, and that many council species might find this development concerning or threatening. To address these concerns and demonstrate their peaceful intentions, humanity was prepared to make an unprecedented offer. She announced that humanity was willing to share their post-scarcity technologies with any species that desired them. This offer came with no charge and no political conditions attached. Any civilization that wanted to achieve the same technological independence that humanity enjoyed would receive complete access to human knowledge and assistance in implementing these advances. The chamber fell into stunned silence as the representatives tried to process this offer. It was completely unprecedented and fell outside the framework of traditional galactic politics. No species in recorded history had ever offered to freely share advanced technology that would fundamentally transform other civilizations. Counselor Vextai spoke slowly as she realized the full implications of what Dr. Rodriguez was proposing. She pointed out that such an offer would fundamentally transform galactic civilization. If every species achieved the technological independence that humanity described, the council itself would become unnecessary. Dr. Rodriguez finished the High Counselor's thought gently but firmly. She acknowledged that yes, widespread technological independence would make the current council system obsolete. But perhaps this was not a tragedy that should be prevented. Perhaps it was simply the next stage of galactic evolution that should be embraced. As the delegates filed out of the conference chamber, each lost in their own thoughts about the implications of humanity's proposal, one thing became absolutely clear: the galaxy would never be the same again. Humanity had not simply left the council system behind. They had transcended the need for it entirely, and were offering to help everyone else do the same. In the months that followed this historic meeting, species after species would approach the Terran Federation with quiet inquiries about the remarkable offer of technological sharing. The Galactic Council, faced with the prospect of voluntary dissolution through the liberation of its member species, would be forced to confront a question that had never before been asked in galactic history. The question was simple, but profound. What is the purpose of government when its citizens no longer need to be governed? Humanity, as always, had found a uniquely human answer to this challenge. You helped them govern themselves.